bajo del mar, bajo del mar. From Bill and Blaze TV, I'm just mixing everything up. I was singing this really nice song that is a Under the Sea, because today we are with our SDG number 14, that belongs to life below water. The British would say water, life below water. So today we're going to have a incredible discussion with a Radia Funna, that is a strategist, futurist, and she has this ex-human theory. So I'm going to welcome her, and let's start to talk about this wonderful SDG that is really also important. So good morning. No, actually, good afternoon for you, my love, my sunshine. Radia, how are you?
To you, Mayra. How are to you? Your birthday is on. Very excited. I'm going to take on water. And before we get to SDG number 14, life below water, I'll do what I do every day. Context about what we're doing. Um, up with Build and Blaze. Build and Blaze is an organizational a theorist. And one of the theories that I recently released of humans and machine. It is the result of about 6 years of research. And it's quite interesting to have looked at let me back up. When I started out with this research, the idea was for me to look at what was disruption. How this fourth industrial revolution was disrupting our organization. For example, past this disruption. But that was a time, and this was looking at this as fourth industrial revolution, that is, as something that required differences in change management. We were still looking at this as something that was this mega disruption that could be gotten past. How do you do your change management for this disruption? Of research, I've realized this is not and almost an output of an evolution that started a long time ago. We started evolving as human beings with machines from the first time we started creating them. From the first time we figured out the fire and stone tools, we were already evolving with different machines. The vast difference, I believe, over the last 50 years is that the evolution went from working with to working with what I call X machines. These machines that could now think for themselves, that could change themselves. They were autonomous, they were brilliant. We had a very different expectation of them, and that changed their expectation, in essence, of us, and it created a level of coevolution, which we go into detail much more in the was the was if this human, this new evolved human is more, I believe, as part of this theory, then how do we partner with this human to solve the globe's greatest challenges. And that brings us to the SDGs. The SDGs are 17 goals that the United Nations member states, so member states of the United Nations, 100 world. The idea was to say these challenges have plagued humanity for our entire existence. Sometimes getting worse, sometimes getting better. And this was a third. There have been two other Millennium Development Goals, other goals that the United Nations has come out with to help us try to solve these global challenges. So the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, an action framework started on charged September 2019 climate change. You really get on that. And if you think about it, if you know this, and you may not, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, were signed on, adopted in 2015, 2030. Like, what can we do differently in this decade than we did in that half a decade? Feels like we already wasted half a decade. So what do we do? Thought, let's do a campaign, which we're calling 17 at 17, because we started it on the 17th day of the United Nations General Assembly. Sorry, on the 17th day of last month, this month. Is it still September? Yes. On the 17th day of September, the first day of the United Nations General Assembly, we started it then, and that's why we're calling it 17 at 17. 17 goals, 17 days. And the idea is we started out with poverty, which is goal 1. Then we went to hunger, zero hunger, goal 2. Then we went to quality education, goal 4. Gender equality, goal 5. Water and sanitation, clean water and sanitation, goal 6. Affordable and clean energy, goal 7. I have a cheat board here. Decent work and economic growth, goal 8. Infrastructure, goal 7. Very difficult to remember. Goal Sustainable Development Goal. We're doing goal where we are by talking a little. I will kick it over to you. Target. So, what does SDG? Life below water is somewhat simple, if you will. It is about protecting our seas, our oceans, within them. Land creatures, we have an unbelievable amount of power, and sea creatures and their environment. But I want us not to look at this as an us versus them, because most of this earth, the only place we know where we. So our quality of life is directly impacted by the quality of the seas, of the waters, the bodies of water, the oceans. Most of this planet. This conversation,
as always, you are enlightening us with all this knowledge, which is not information. So I have a few questions. since there are like so many SDGs, especially because when I was thinking life without water, I was just thinking about animals that live in there. But there is also like so affected by the practice. I didn't realize, but they say like in 2050, that gives us a really important thought. We have, I mean, there's like so many enterprises and use food or whatever, but they're covered by plastic. But why governments aren't doing anything about these plastics and containers? I mean, how come, honestly, all this plastic is getting into the sea? Because it's not that just someone go to the beach and just throw a plastic in there. It's like a few, I mean, like big amounts of tons are going straight to the sea by big companies. I mean, I can't imagine just like if we throw a plastic or a straw in the sea, it's going to fill up as it is now. So my question is, what as a citizen, or in order to governments to implant some laws? Because as I said, there's like so many plastic in the sea, and not just plastic, oil and a lot of pollution going there. And I have this question. So what can we do about that? Because it's not only like eliminate the use of plastic, but also make laws for this, to throw everything to the sea. That happens that also the sea gives us food. So it's, I really don't get it. And the other thing is overfishing. So I have these two questions for you, Radia. Like, what can we do, honestly? Like in this world that is accelerating, and we talk about production and responsible consumption. And to me, this is really important because everything is going to the sea, and the sea is giving us also life, and they have ecosystems. So we're actually killing everything on our way to industrialize.
That's a very good question, a very good set of questions. In order for me to answer those in context, let me start out by contextualizing this Sustainable Development Goal, SDG 14, Life Below Water, further. Let's start out with the most important of the targets. I mean, there are a bunch of targets, but the first thing we have to remember, if we just want to contextualize what the ocean water mean to us, the first thing is that they provide food for us, they provide medicine, they provide biofuel, millions. It is critical to keep healthy oceans. Also, there's another, you cannot have climate change, climate action. Several times in this show, we've talked about how the SDGs are connected. Those are two very interesting connections. These two SDGs, they connect very well with each other. Now let's talk a little bit about the targets, because that'll lead us to what you were talking about. The 20, that's just next year. Especially SDG 14, was that by 2020 we would have prevented and significantly what you're talking about, activity. Now, been done, and no, it doesn't feel like any steps have been taken to prevent and significantly taken. But a year out from this target, or about 2020, by 2020 protected marine and coastal ecosystems. That's what you were talking about. Why is the life in the different oceans, in the different bodies of water, have, I said before, are bigger than our land. And just like how weather patterns, etc., so too is that depending on how deep in the ocean, it's a different ecosystem depending on how cold the weather is. You know, there are when the weather is almost that flourish more in the warmth, right, in tropical environments. And those ecosystems are changing as our weather patterns are changing. As we are beginning to find water, we are not the only ones suffering as a result. Our bodies of water, the ecosystems within those bodies of water, the many creatures that work together to create that ecosystem, are also being punished and often migrating away from that water. So that reduces, I mean, we're already seeing that in the United States. And we're going to Alaska for fish because there isn't enough fish, in essence, in the East Coast to feed us. And then you start looking at how do we strengthen resilience and achieve these healthy and productive oceans? Because if the oceans aren't healthy and productive, forward with a lot of the goals that we're climate action is relying on a strong, resilient, healthy ocean. But let's move on with other elements of 2020. We want to regulate harvesting and overfishing. That was the other piece we talked about. So now we've talked about pollution. Ocean. How do we end that? Including action against illegal. You know, we of course have illegal and unreported and unregulated fishing practices. How do we regulate that so we can restore fish stocks in the shortest time possible? How do we try to produce maximum yield according to the... These again are pieces that are critical as we're looking to achieve SDG 14. And finally, in 2020, we 10% based on available science. So that's quite a bit. And I, who are not in the space at all, I mean, I'm somewhat in it, but not really, can say that it doesn't look like we're doing that right now. So how are we going to do that in a year? I think in short, we can't. But how do we change that so another 5 years doesn't go by? Because actually by 2025, the goal is to prevent and significantly reduce that marine pollution that I said earlier. Whereas by 2020, we have not even met those targets. In short, my answer to what you're asking is when you say, how do we make a difference? What can we, the people, of this show? The first is that people have to know there's a problem. That's the first thing. How can you have to know what they can do about the problem? We can indeed impacted by our actions. Because although each and every one of us is not as prolific a polluter as a large corporation, so if there are 1 million, which there are over 1 billion of us, right? Let's just take one country that has 1 million people. If 500,000 people are dumping straws every day of a year, and that things we can do, we can be plastic. Plastic is not biodegradable. So when you use plastic and it may eventually end up in the ocean, especially things like plastic straws. So it's one of the states, you see that here, are regulating plastic out. If you go to New York City, for example, plastic is regulated out. You can't have plastic. All of those pieces actually make a difference. They make a fairly significant piece. The other knowledge piece goes beyond just us, because there are millions of them as well. Giving them equal knowledge so that they have just as much knowledge as the large fishing organizations also helps. States are adopting get that kind of thinking, the thinking that they're adopting from the UN. It also gives them that access to that knowledge, but also giving them access to resources, giving them access to the kind of knowledge, resource, while not losing the way in which they live, their way of be the first step. I know that and today it looks like we have so much knowledge, but what we have is a whole lot of information, not enough knowledge. So how do we start to pierce that and provide free and open knowledge so that people change my practices? Here are a few fairly easy things I can do. So that would be my thinking.
Thank you, Radia. I was thinking when you say the whole planet, I'm thinking like it's to make a change. It's really an us, and it's about make practices. Is about how much do how many things do I buy, in the market? Do I need all a local market and get things there and don't get plastic? I remember one friend, you know him, Paul Tasner. He lives in the US and he's a social entrepreneur. And he started a social entrepreneur plastic. And one day he was telling me, like, the way he started is like he went to the supermarkets and he just took the products and left the plastic to the cashier, and they were like the companies are making all these with plastic, but on the packages, I don't want them. You take them, throw them, give them back to the company, but I'm just gonna take the product. So this is one step, but I mean, there's like so many things we can do on our daily lives and practices, so we can actually make a change. If I do it, if you do it, if my family do it, if my friends do it, I agree with you. We are more than we're more people, plenty more people, millions of people, and if we change our practices, if we actually tell them, I like your product, but I don't agree the way you package and the way you process everything, I think companies must change with this. I mean, there is a there's a big difference now, because companies companies they use from us, but now that we have technology, now that we have social media, there's like so many companies I've seen going down because they had a bad practice. I'm talking about any company. So I do believe, as you said, we stop using straws, we stop using specific things. shut down because they have like so many employees also, but they have to think ahead, and they have to be like, if I want these guys, these millennials, these new generations, these green generations to consume me, I have to change my practices and the way I do everything. There's like so many entrepreneurs that they are making a bags made of a cactus, made of a bananas, like the peel of the bananas, avocado also. There's like so many entrepreneurs that they just need investments, and I think these big companies should get connected with that. At Social Jammers, we're trying to do that kind of. As you said, there's no knowledge. These big companies are just like working ahead and thinking, how do I make money? How do I make these consumers happy? And on the other side, change. I don't, I want to make bags still with avocado and with waste and with organic products. And I make them together, like get together to know each other, and to know each other they get this knowledge, and I think we can have these big companies making plastic bags with avocado or with banana or with a cactus. This way we don't, but I'm just thinking about this, but as I said, it's like how is the way that I consume water, is the way I use lights. Do I need to have lights when I'm in my house, or it's okay if I just work outside? Do I need to change my cell phone every month, even though I know to change a phone is making people in really bad conditions? It's about making a change of my habits, and from there I think I can make a difference. I have this saying that is, if I change, the world changes, and that's it.
I think that is a really good statement. If I change, the world changes. I would like to leave this on a very positive note, because there is good news. We work with a lot of large companies, and we're happy to say that big companies are interested in how they can enact the SDGs within their organizations. And there are many companies actually in the Fortune 500 that are leading the charge on changing their packaging. You look at a lot of hotels, you look at a lot of, not a lot, but a fair amount of hotels. Of course, grocery stores, you're beginning to see food companies, larger food companies, test the market to see if people have an appetite for paying a little bit more for biodegradable packaging, for paying a little bit more for better food, better quality food. And I think that we, as consumers, have humans, citizens of this planet, the planet for us. What it has done for us is allowed us to be guests who are safe here and all of that. So we have no choice. We must take care of this planet. We don't know of another. And even if we did, how rude. How can we be the guests who are being taken by? What we can do as citizens of this planet, as dwellers of this planet, let's first start out with being aware. There are choices often between paper and plastic. Sometimes you have no choice. And now when you don't have a choice, recognize that. And as you said, Mayra, use social media to make sure your voice is heard and say, look, a plastic bag here, and I cannot make two elements aware. The first, of course, could be the business, social media. The second is your governments. Ultimately, quite a few of the 193 member states of the UN are allegedly democratic. And we'll talk a little bit about strong institutions. Democratic institutions, it means that you elected those leaders. And if you elect leaders that care about the planet and care about plastic versus paper, that's the first step. So for you, what do you use? If you don't know too much, know one. Make the choice to get away from plastic when you can. What do you do? The other piece of it is your government. How do you make your voice heard? You vote. Then, of course, what do you do with the businesses? You choose the right one, but you also force the one you don't choose out what you think is important. From a what do you do perspective, ultimately, as you said, you're absolutely right when you say that if you change, the world changes. And ultimately, the change will start with us, with our choices. The piece that we can do, that governments can do, that UN can do, it's all about providing you with information, with choices, with options. Have these conversations at home, and please feel free to have these conversations with us. We are definitely at the bottom of the hour, so I'm going to kick it over to you, Mayra, to close. But thank you for joining us today, and thank you. I thought this was a great conversation. Really appreciate the time.
Well, thank you, Radia. I really appreciate we are doing this together, because I think somehow we are we are making some noise. We want to get more voices in here in this project. We want you people. At the UN, they have a guide. It has 4 different levels, and for you, and it basically says what you can do from your couch, from your house, outside your house, and from your work. There's like so many different things you can do, and that way you can actually make a change, make a difference, and save the world. Right now we just have one place to live, and it's this a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful planet. It's our home. Let's keep it that way. Let's think today what we can do so the world heals a little bit more. We have animals, we have plants, we have flowers, we have ecosystems, we have like so many lives out there. If we start to make the change, the world changes. So that's it for today, and we see you tomorrow. We talk about a SDG number 15, but I don't remember. Life on land. Life on land. So we see you tomorrow. Don't forget to follow us at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We are as a Build and Blaze and Social Jammers. And don't forget to use the hashtag B&BX. And that's everything for today, folks. I'm going to celebrate my birthday.